Welcome to the Infidel, podcast of the damned, the weekly companion show of the Infidel News. Join us as we discuss this week's religious accounts from an atheist perspective. From Timbuktu to Toledo, from Kathmandu to Canada, from Bangalore to Bangladesh. We deplore, you deride. And here are your hosts, Dave and Nicole.
Hello and welcome to show number 35 of the Infidel podcast of the damned. I'm your host, atheist and author J. David Core, and with me is my co-host, Nicole Samard. Hello, Nicole.
Hey, you forgot something.
I forgot to call you extraordinaire. I know, I'm sorry. Also joining us today is Christine M. Shellska from the Atheist International Alliance. Welcome to the show.
Hello, it's actually Atheist Alliance International.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
I typed it backwards. Today is Friday, October 2nd, 2015, and we're going to be discussing the upcoming episodes of the Infidel News, which will begin running Monday, October 5th, 2015. Today's newsreader is the Mudbrooker. Show notes for all of our podcasts can be found at infidelpodcast.blogspot.com. So what is Atheist Alliance International exactly?
We are an NGO with UN special consultative status. Obviously, we're international. We have 26 member organizations from around the world, and we've got individual and monthly and lifetime members as well that help support us. And we are interested in standing up for secular values worldwide, basically, and to try to fight religion when it encroaches on the social well-being of others, and to endorse science as a decision-making tool to make good policy, and that's it in a nutshell. Yeah,
that's cool. So, are you you say you're involved with the UN in what capacity?
We have special consultative status, so that means we have a representation at meetings and occasionally get a chance to speak. I actually addressed them back in February of this year, and this was for a session on youth and social justice. So we have a lovely gentleman named Rustam Singh, who is also our magazine editor, and he helps craft some of these speeches because they take a fair bit of research, and you're only allowed to access certain information so that, you know, it's acknowledged by the UN. So we talked about female genital mutilation. We talked about the right or the need for secular education and healthcare, and LGBTQ rights, things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And how well does that go over with like the Middle East and the Orthodox countries?
Well, okay, so when I was actually speaking, what happened was the meeting ran long, and it's a 3-hour meeting, but they wanted to make sure the NGOs had, you know, a say, right? But after 3 hours, the translators have to be be released from their duties because it's a contractual thing. So really, the only people that were left there were English speakers, and a lot of people, I think, were just tired. So it was a kind of a bit of an empty room, but there is video out there, and I mean, I hope I pissed a few people off with what I had to say, and mostly made, you know, reasonable people happy, you know.
Actually, just so something technical, it's more than a contractual thing with the interpreters, because to be able to hear one language through your ears and speak it out in a different language through your mouth is extremely physically and mentally demanding. So that's why there is a limit as to how long they can do it, unless, you know, they have more interpreters on staff, and then they can relay one another. But it's extremely, extremely demanding.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
So, excuse me. So, other than dealing with the UN, what types of things are you guys involved with?
Well, we have right now an atheist asylum project that we're trying to, we're trying to help as many people as we can. When we were at the non-conference, and that's where I gave a talk, and that's where I met you guys. And at that time, our caseload was 13, and now we're up to 20, and those requests keep coming in. So we're trying to help people seek asylum, and sometimes it's a case that we can, you know, just help them with information and resources, but it's something we really need help with, right? So I encourage listeners out there to help us by either joining Atheist Alliance International, going to our page, making a donation. Here in Canada, there's a shareholders agreement type program where organizations can basically help sponsor refugees. And there's also an initiative called the Groups of Five. So basically, five citizens, citizens or residents of Canada over the age of 18 can come together and sponsor a refugee. So that's something we're trying to help make happen too. Yeah.
Do you do
But
those
how
kind of
does
programs in
I was
Go
going
ahead,
to
Nicole.
ask how do people join your group?
Just go to our website, atheistalliance.org, and you'll see information on membership. Yeah, different
What
types of membership. Yeah.
when you are doing these types of things like the asylum stuff, do you do that in cooperation with other organizations that are maybe not as secular?
Yes, we have actually spoken to a Lutheran group. Now, the issue, of course, with bringing with applying for asylum is that you can't discriminate on the basis of religion, right? So it might be the case that if we work out some kind of agreement with them, and I hope we do, because Atheist Alliance International is a U.S. based group, and although we've got initiatives going on there too, we can't qualify for something like the shareholders agreement thing because we're not Canadian, right? So yeah, if other organizations out there are willing to work with us and if they, especially if they've got shareholders agreement status, or if they're interested in applying for that, yeah, we welcome working with anybody, and hopefully people that aren't necessarily atheists will welcome working with us as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
As far as the membership, like Nicole was asking about, are there fees involved with that, or
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can become a monthly member or you can become a yearly member. There's student memberships. You can become a lifetime member. There's a number of different options out there.
And is there like a voting member type of or a thing where you get involved with like being on the board, or is that something that you're done by invitation, or?
Well, you can be nominated to the board. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
We also have our member organizations. So if there's groups out there that want to become an organizational member, we welcome that too. Like I said, we've got about 26 from around the world. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So as far as like promoting atheism, though, is that any part of what you're doing, or is it or are you just like promoting secularism?
I think it would be fair to say that we are trying to normalize atheism, right? But I think the political impetus centers around secularism, right?
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is obviously the two are tied, but
How
secular, you don't necessarily have to be an atheist to be a secularist by any stretch, right?
Right.
So,
Right. And you don't
yeah,
have, and you don't necessarily have to be a secularist to be an atheist either. Just
exactly.
look
Yeah.
look at
Yeah.
China.
Yeah. That's right.
how
Yeah.
long how long has your group existed?
We started in, I think, the late 90s, and at that time it was basically American based, and now we have two groups, one of which is one of our members, and that's Atheist Alliance of America. So the reason we decided to make that sort of split was because there's a lot of issues that focus particularly around the U.S. context, and it's a little bit overwhelming, like trying to handle both. It being a U.S. based organization, you want to be able to treat both U.S. based issues and international issues. So it was kind of a membership driven decision after a questionnaire had been put out about whether we should remain as sort of a U.S. based group or have two groups and have more focus on international issues on our part, right? So
Yep.
yeah.
So you were saying before we went on the air, just to change the subject a little bit, that you have a podcast.
I do, yeah. Actually, it's hosted by Dr. Randy Tyson here in Calgary, and my co-hosts are Twyla, and Nate Phelps is sometimes on there, and Dean Morrison, he's a local musician. You guys know who Nate Phelps is, right?
Yes,
Is he the
Yeah, he's the son of Fred Phelps,
Right.
Westboro Baptist Church. He's very active in the LGBTQ community, and our podcast is called The Legion of Reason. Yeah, and you can find us online.
okay.
Yeah.
Are like at legionofreason.com, or is it through YouTube?
It's online. We have a website, but we're also on Facebook too.
Facebook. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you prefer to do like that where most people find you through Facebook?
It depends. I would say probably yes. Yeah.
how did he get involved? Like, is he part of the alliance, or is he just part of the podcast?
Well, he's part of the podcast, but we have our local CFI here in Calgary that we're all pretty active in, or so we know him personally, and that's how he became involved.
He lives in Canada now?
Yeah, he lives in Calgary here. Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Probably wanted to get away from the family as far as possible.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a fun group. Okay. So, what do you have any other do you have a blog or anything like that that people should follow? Like, does the Legion have a blog or anything along that lines?
We post quite a bit of stuff on Facebook, so that's probably the best place to find us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And if anybody wants to friend me on Facebook, I've got a strange last name. I'm easy to find. So I also just want to quickly mention that I'm very privileged to be the first Canadian to be elected to the board of directors for the American Humanist Association. So I didn't want to neglect mentioning that wonderful organization that's been around for 70 some years now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, they're
American
amazing.
Humanists. Yep.
Yeah.
They're a good group.
Yeah.
And what was your position?
I'm on the board of directors.
On the board of directors. So
Yeah.
Very good.
So how long have you been part of that group?
Since January of this year was when I officially sort of started with them.
So you're very
And you're on the board
active.
already.
Yeah, I'm also trying to finish my PhD, so that's always fun.
What's your doctorate in?
I am looking at the intelligent design movement's rhetorical strategies, basically. Yeah.
That's
So,
good.
yeah.
Do you have
God
do you have
did
a
it.
thesis?
That's it.
Sorry.
I was saying
do
that
you have-
God did it. That's the whole thing.
That's God did it.
Yeah.
Do you know what your thesis is going to be?
Well, it's kind of in process. I've started off wanting to look at particularly the Discovery Institute and their strategies, but I've since become a little bit captivated by debates, and there's not a lot of work that's been done on the rhetoric of religious apologetics. So I'm kind of wandering off in that direction a little bit and changing my focus a little bit here. So
There's the rhetoric of Christian apologetics changes every time a new. It's like the goalpost thing. They change their rhetoric every other 6 months, and it's hard to keep track of it.
They do, but some of the strategies have been around since about the 1700s too.
Yeah.
They're just trying to regurgitate the same old argument and make it sound a little more sciencey, and So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Here's the one I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the new Mars Mars argument, because I came up as soon as I heard that there was water on Mars, and that they had discovered water on Mars and it's flowing water. I remembered that years ago the idea was there's water on Mars because there's canals. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it turned out that there were no canals on Mars. So then there was probably not water on Mars. And now they found water on Mars. So it's good. I can see them using that. They use that argument all the time about how science changes and God doesn't. So I'm waiting for Mars to become part of that argument.
Was it not Ken Ham who went off on a rant about how, oh my, we're getting a storm here. Space exploration is satanic and all this kind of stuff, I think.
Oh, well, did he?
I think so. Yeah.
I didn't hear that. Oh, you're blinking out.
I am blinking out. We could have issues with power here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I lose you, what I'll try and do is broadcast a network from my phone and join you on my netbook. But
Okay.
yeah, suddenly I just big gust of wind and that little glitch in the power. So
Yeah.
I hope I'll be around.
It was exciting.
If not, please forgive me for about 5 minutes while I set up an alternative technology. Yeah.
And Ken Ham has,
Never mind.
Kent Hovind has spoken about it this week as well on his show. He's got a
he's such a
30-minute
treasure.
daily show.
Yes, yeah. Now that he's out of jail. Yeah.
And he says that we cannot see any of the exoplanets. We cannot see them, even if there are some that we've actually seen. And he says if the sun is, the planet's own sun is wobbling, it doesn't mean that it's because of a planet turning around it. It's
God holding it on a string,
Yeah, he is in full denial.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know? You weren't there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You've never been to XK9.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and move on, and let's do the first news story.
Okay.
All authority comes from God, especially the police. In April, there was an incident involving a custody dispute which ultimately led to a Texas cop in Hunts County hitting a 38-year-old pregnant woman. Video footage showed cops entering into the home of Deanna Jo Robinson, an Air Force veteran, without a warrant in order to take her 18-month-old son away from her on the orders of Child Protective Services. A series of events ultimately led to an officer repeatedly hitting her despite her continual warning that she was pregnant. The video footage has led to an outrage. Following this incident, Hunt County Sheriff Randy Meeks wrote an editorial in the Herald Banner. More specifically, in response to a grand jury clearing one of his deputies of any legal culpability in the videotape beating of Robinson, the pregnant Air Force veteran. In this editorial, Sheriff Meeks espouses his belief that all authority, including his, comes from God. In the editorial, Sheriff Meeks writes, "Due to recent events, I can no longer be silent concerning what our country allows. It is amazing to me that criminals who break into our homes and steal from us, those who sell drugs to our children, those who abuse innocent and defenseless children, those who rape our wives and daughters, those who commit cold-blooded murders are all innocent until proven guilty. Yet law enforcement officers are found guilty as soon as it appears that the officer has done something wrong. Way before the whole incident can be reviewed and the truth obtained, that officer is found guilty and nobody cares what the facts are. This, folks, is a travesty." Sheriff Meeks goes on to assert that though officers make mistakes, they are ultimately very few. He then goes on to cite Romans 13:1 and 13:2 as support for his claim that all authority comes from God. Romans 13:1 states, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God." Romans 13:2 goes on to assert, "Whoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation."
What year does that guy think it is? It's like
What planet does
like
the
the-
guy think it is? Wow. Well,
What
what country, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's talking like Middle Ages Europe. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like don't question the authority. It's God ordained. That's a little that's the kind of problems that we're having now. There's that story that's been going around about the bumper stickers that say "In God We Trust" that all of the police are putting on their vehicles right now, which is problematic because of what it says, but it's a difficult issue to deal with because it's the motto, it's the national motto in the United States right now. So that's a perfect argument for why it shouldn't be the national motto, because you end up with guys like this guy, using that as fodder to say that God blesses America, God puts me in charge, and God told me I can kick your ass anytime I want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty frightening. Yeah.
Yep.
What?
And I forget who it is, but shoot, Shubat. Theodore Shubat. He wants a theocracy, and he wants everything going back to the Middle Ages, and putting, he wants the Inquisition brought back, and he also wants gays put to death.
In what country?
The U.S.
The U.S. I don't know this guy.
You've never heard of Theodore Shubat?
No,
Yeah,
no. But his
he's
first
one
name
of
means
those-
God loves. It
He's
does.
one of those
Theodore
religious.
means love of God.
He's one of those religious right-wing nuts. He's using. He's got a podcast, I think, in the website. He's fairly big, actually.
I haven't heard of him. I'll have to look him up.
I heard of the incident, but I wouldn't have remembered his name. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I never remember people's name. That's why I had to check it on my computer while you guys were talking.
Oh, so you cheated.
I always cheat. That's
Cole's
my
a
only
cheater.
way. That's my only way to be able to deal with things.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, you have to do what you have to do, Nicole.
Yeah.
It's called a life hack, not a cheat.
It's a life hack. And yeah, and because he's the producer of the show, God ordained that he can cheat. See how I brought that full circle?
Just please don't hit me.
Yeah, don't hit us.
Absolutely. Oh well, we're supposed to throw things at gays and disobedient children and all sorts of people like that.
Yeah, well, but not us. Okay. Okay. So anyway, the sheriff we have a number of crazy sheriffs in the United States. There's Arapo or Arapoa, whatever his name is, down in Texas, and then I think there's one in New York. I forget his name, but there was one in New York that was in the news recently. A crazy sheriff. We just got crazy sheriffs all over the place. I don't know what it is with sheriffs, but it's like they all read Robin Hood as a kid and sympathized with Nottingham, and they could do that too. I guess I don't know, but yeah, it's bad. It's getting bad here.
Yeah, there does seem to be something within the culture of, I guess, like policing and that sort of thing that seems to, in a lot of places, present very bad messages and behaviors. But
Yeah.
which is bad enough. But then to try and use scripture to justify that bad behavior is really,
Right.
taking it up an extra notch on the deplorable scale.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's what this whole situation was in Ferguson, and that's what the situation was in Baltimore. Was the police just being given too much authority, and then the people who are supposed to be watching over them don't rein them in and let them go. And there was a situation not too long ago. I can't remember the name of the young man that was killed in a vehicle because he wasn't strapped in right, and they were doing crazy driving, and he fell down and died. And
Yeah. Was he not having a heart attack or something and he pulled over?
something like he started complaining, and they pulled over, and he died on the side of the road before.
Yeah.
But it was caused by the erratic driving that the police were doing. But what happened was, when you bring up these cases and you talk about how it's authority and that it's about not being reined in, the fact that a few of the cops in the vehicle were black gets used to poo-poo any argument that you make, and so the same kind of thing happens when an atheist like complains against like in God we trust on the cars and stuff like that. The validity of the argument gets lost in well, you just hate God, they just they
The
just
denial of that discrimination exists, right?
Right, the denial of discrimination
racial.
doesn't exist at all. Yeah, it's just victim. It's victim mentality. They're just being victims. You're just being a victim when you say that, or they're just being a victim when they complain about that. So, because they want it,
But isn't it true that we hate God? Isn't it true that we hate God?
I don't hate God. I don't hate the Easter Bunny.
Yeah, Santa or the Tooth Fairy.
And we have no moral compass.
Well, I don't have a moral compass. That's true. That one's true.
How about you, Christine? Do you have a moral compass?
Sometimes. Yes, I have a moral compass. I think just kind of, be good to your fellow human beings should pretty much about cover it. It might need a little time, flushing out from time to time, but the golden rule is, runs across cultures and times and seems to have served us reasonably well.
Right. With the whole asylum thing that you're dealing with right now, that's a moral issue, and you're clearly on the right side of that. Donald Trump, on the other hand, today, who's a great Christian, said that if we take asylum, if we do give any asylum to anybody before he becomes president, as soon as he becomes president, he's sending them all back home.
Yeah, and yet he had said, I think a week or so ago, like, oh, let's, we don't want the Mexicans, but we'll take in the Syrians because it's the right thing to do. And now he's like totally backtracking on that, which I guess is no surprise, but he is a colossal idiot,
Oh yeah, huge.
Yeah.
Well, he said you could allow the Syrians only, but only the Christian Syrians, not the Muslim ones.
Right. Yeah. And Ben Carson said that a Muslim shouldn't be president, and then backtracked on that. He tried to say that he wasn't talking about Muslim people. He was talking about Sharia law, but that's not what he said.
Yeah. So you know that our mayor here in Calgary is a Muslim?
No, I didn't know that.
Nenshi? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
And he's been voted one of the top mayors in the world and stuff. He's just awesome. He's obviously a very secular person. He was a grand marshal in our Pride Parade a few years back. Just a really wonderful, great man that we all love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome mayor. Yeah.
Very
So
good.
if people were to ask me, would you vote for a Muslim? Like, I would, and I have.
I would, yeah. I would have and would again.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let's go on to the next story.
Okay.
Court ordered religious classes for mother who wants to keep her children. A mother in New Mexico had her rights to partake in co-parenting her son suspended for a time because she refused to participate in a counseling session that included religious indoctrination. When she declined to continue with the sessions, she was placed in contempt of court. The court-appointed counselor was questioned by the media on some of her practices but refused to answer the questions that cast doubt on the propriety of her methods, which included starting each meeting with a prayer and assigning homework consisted of probing the client's religious preferences. The court would not back down from the requirement that the mother finish the sessions with that particular counselor, and so she did so just to get the process behind her and have her children again. No legal actions were taken by the mother in this case, but ACLU officials were contacted and said that the methods being used by the counselor were inappropriate.
The counselor? The judge was inappropriate.
The judge wasn't appropriate, but they do that a lot, though. And whenever they order counseling, they expect you to finish that counseling because otherwise it just ties up the system. So the judge was acting within perimeters by saying that she had to finish that, but he should have taken into account why she was asking to be moved, but they don't. Because they have too many people asking, and once you start allowing it, it just snowballs. So I understand the court's position, and the ACLU is exactly right that the counselor is the one who is overstepping and shouldn't be doing that type of thing with people who were ordered to be with her by a court. But the courts also, they order people into like AA, which is also religious.
Well, I'm not sure about that particular situation, but I know, and I'm not sure if this is Canada-wide, but here in Alberta, if you get a divorce and there's children involved, there is a mandatory kind of co-parenting. It's a workshop. It's not a counseling session or anything like that. And, everybody does it who has children that are divorcing. And so that I think is pretty standard stuff. But yeah, when that woman called and said, look, this is religious indoctrination, action should have been taken and she should have been given an alternative right away. And I'm really glad the ACLU is looking into this because that's ridiculous. Not to mention, hopefully I'm not jumping the gun too much here, but the fact that she's using a library and basically having people like literally pay her cash under the table and booking it in their names because it's illegal for her to do that, that's pretty dodgy,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing with court-ordered counseling is always a touchy issue anyway, because the parents may be in perfect agreement about how they're going to do things, and then a court will step in and say, but you're going to do it this way, and then they end up ignoring the court order anyhow most of the time. When I got divorced twice. Can you imagine anybody that would divorce someone as charming as me? But anyway,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but
you should have learned your lesson the first time.
Should have. Yeah. Both times there were children involved, and both times I wrote dissolution papers myself. I did, and both of my ex-wives totally agreed to everything because we sat down and we said, this is what we're going to do, right? And we went over everything and we agreed on everything. And I wrote up dissolution papers and I showed her the dissolution papers and she agreed to everything to dissolution papers. And then we went to the court, and the court basically like pulled it apart and piece by piece forced us to in court agree to each item, even though we had already signed it, and I understand why they do that, but it gets to be kind of frustrating when everything that you've already. Divorce is very difficult when lawyers get involved and when the court gets involved. That's what makes it hard. It doesn't have to be as hard as it usually is a lot of times. If there's acrimony, sure, but if there's no acrimony, there's no reason for it to be like that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I guess the reality too is even if you do get sent to a counseling session or whatever, reality is reality, and you confront it as it unfolds. And people are individuals, and you'll work out your own style of parenting, and hopefully it'll be a good, positive, thing for the kids and all. But to have it dictated like that, like I said, in Alberta, I don't. I'm sorry if my chair is squeaking in the background here. Every time I shift, it makes a little noise, and I'm sorry for that. Um, it's just sort of guidelines to help people process this and get through it, and be healthy parents. And it's not a dictatorial thing, right? It's fine. Either you'll take good advice, or you'll just work out your own style, right?
Right.
Hopefully most divorce cases aren't where things are going to go catastrophically wrong. Kids are going to be exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to, in terms of acrimony. But I guess for a lot of people it's probably helpful because it's new territory for people, and to sit there for an hour, it's just not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A few years ago, there was a.
I was
Go
going
ahead,
to say
Nicole.
that I hope that the judge took note of the fact that this counselor is not appropriate and should not be used again.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably what's going to happen.
Well, and I hope the ACLU continues to investigate and see what the hell's going on there.
Right.
Especially, like if she's using public property inappropriately too, like what else, what's going on,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, there was a case where there was a father who was denied any custody to his children at all because he refused to take them to church. Remember that one, Nicole?
It was in England.
Was that in England?
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
it was. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So he was denied all custody.
yep.
Well, which was because the mother wanted him to go to church, and he said he wasn't going to take them, and so they said, "Well, then you can't have your kids."
Was there ever any follow-up on that? Because I just can't imagine that.
I haven't heard anything since.
Okay. Yeah. That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well-
We should look into that, Nicole. We should see if there's more on that story.
Well, while we played the next story, I will do a quick Google and see if I can find anything.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that now.
A fight for the right to adopt and spank children. The Massachusetts Supreme Court is trying to decide whether a Christian couple should be allowed to adopt foster children, given that their religious beliefs include spanking children to discipline them. The couple has already agreed not to spank foster kids placed temporarily in their care, so the question only arises should they choose to adopt these kids permanently as their own. The couple claims that they're being discriminated against on religious grounds, but state officials say that children in foster care often come from abusive homes and spanking might be traumatic for them. The couple already has 3 children of their own, and they presumably spanked them at one time, so we're left to wonder if foster children were adopted there, would it turn into a 2-class system. The couple's lawyer says that the nature of the no spanking rule prohibits all Christians and Jews from adopting foster children, even though they are clearly religious couples who do not practice spanking.
Yeah, that I don't understand that part of the last part of the story there, but about the how does it preclude Christians and Jews because the Bible says don't spare the rod, so that would preclude them? Is that what he's saying?
I'm not sure. It's kind of crazy. It's a crazy story. Period.
Yeah, yeah. What's the name of that family that is all about spanking?
That wrote up that book called
yes,
To Train Up a Child. Can't
Yeah.
remember their names, but yeah.
Yeah.
They're in
They're-
Florida.
Mudbrooker's an expert on them.
Yeah, that book's caused a few deaths. People following that's just unbelievable. Yeah.
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 Yeah. But the other thing
I
about
think
that
that,
story,
that's like child beating, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as I was spanked as a kid. Back in those days, I think everybody spanked.
Yeah.
But then we evolved and we don't spank anymore. And but you still have people in the culture who think that children become rude if they're not spanked, etc. They're unruly if they're not spanked, which isn't really true. They're just as unruly if they are spanked, and in some ways they grow up to be worse adults if they are spanked. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The another thing about that story that confused me was the idea of foster parents adopting the children, because isn't that something that the system doesn't allow? Foster children are not supposed to be adopted, are they?
I don't know. I thought kind of the end goal was actually to get them adopted.
Yes,
But
they
yeah, but
are.
not
Yeah.
into their foster family.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, usually
Actually,
it's not into the foster family.
I've
That I
got a
didn't
few
know.
examples. I remember at least 2 examples where they were adopted by foster parents.
Well, my girlfriend actually lived in West Virginia, and she fostered 3 kids, and the state asked her and her ex-husband to adopt them because it was the only way they were going to be able to keep them together. That everybody who was talking about adopting them wanted only 1 or 2 of them or something like that. So she ended up adopting all 3 of the kids who she had only been fostering initially, but because they had been in the foster system and because she was their foster mother, there was all kind of extra scrutiny put on her. Whereas if she had been somebody who was just in the adoption system, waiting her turn and taking these kids, it would have been a completely different system. They would have looked at it completely differently.
I would have thought both would be pretty stringent.
But well, when somebody adopts a child, it's supposed to be, in theory, it's supposed to be that this child is now their child, just like any other natural born child would be their child. So once at that point, the state gets out, gets out of the way. But they didn't in this case because they had been fostered. They stayed in there. They stayed in there all along. But when you're fostering kids, you're paid a stipend, and when you adopt kids, you're not. So that change there's a lot of a lot of reasons because of that they don't like foster parents to adopt kids. So
And
Interesting, because you would think if, sorry.
I was just going to say that I cheated, and I found out the author of To Train Up a Child, it's actually Michael and Debbie Pearl.
Pearl, yes, Pearl, the Pearls, that's their names.
Yes. That's the good point of having a monster computer and to be handling the whole show. I can cheat like that.
Yeah, you could just sit out and pretend like that we're not even talking.
Who?
But you have this rapt look on your face, like you're so involved, but you're actually doing something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cheers.
Cheers. It's Friday.
Okay, shall we go on to the our Christian glitches?
Christian glitches. Let's do it.
And you can guess why I call it Christian glitches, right? Christine?
Yeah.
God is giving all the convergence of all the events that could possibly come together. This month of September is truly a month of September that you will remember.
That's right. And it's the year of convergence, and it's the month of convergence. Before we go into just several of the events that are taking place just this September, let's just talk about what a prophetic year 2015 is. It's called, let's talk about the Great Convergence. Right now, God is speaking. This year marks 70 years since the end of World War II. It also marks 70 years since the atomic bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 70 years since the birth of the United Nations. 70 years since the end of the Holocaust. It's the 70th meeting at the UN General Assembly this September. It's the 70th generation since Enoch, which was 4,900 years ago. It's the 70th Jubilee since Israel left Egypt 3,500 years ago.
Wow.
It's 14 years, 7 times 2, since 9/11. And it's been 7 years since the 2008 market crash. That's just the convergence of this year, not talking about even everything that's taking place this September, which we'll talk about.
Wow. 70.
And didn't Ringo
70.
Starr just turn like 70 years old?
70, Ringo 70.
I'm sure I could find some other 70 type stuff on,
Well, most of the things were, it was the end of World War II, it was the dropping of the bomb at Nagasaki, and it was the beginning of the UN. It was like those were 3 different things. They all happened at the same time because it was all the
Yeah.
same. It's one thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It was all part of World War II.
It was all part of that what ended World War II. So yeah, that just makes no sense. And then it's 14 years since 9/11. So
Seven
that's
plus
seven
seven. I
times
know.
two.
It's like you're really reaching, right?
That's why. That's what I love about numerology. It's so convoluted and so stupid.
It's so easy to make up conspiracies. Um, my my most recent novel, the last novel that I did with my detective stories, is all based on a conspiracy theory that I made up. I completely made up this conspiracy theory, and uh, what it's based on is, and this is if you look at the if you get a chance to look at the website, I'll link to the website where I have all the pictures. Um, this is it all works out perfectly, but it all works out perfectly just because things work out sometimes. But it was all built based on the tall towers. Like if you look at the Seattle Space Needle, the CN Tower, and the Stratosphere in Las Vegas, they all form a perfect scalene triangle, which is no big deal. But
Oh
but
no, it's a big
oh
deal.
oh no,
It's the
but
Illuminati and the pyramid, and
yeah, but if you take but
Yeah.
if you take the tall towers in Auckland, New Zealand, uh, uh, Sydney, Australia, Kuala Lumpur, Macau, Shanghai, and Tokyo. They all have similar towers to there's the Oriental Pearl and the anyway, they all have these similar towers, and they form the same triangle. If it
triangles
does,
are great for conspiracies.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. You gotta have a
nothing.
triangle in
Nothing.
there. Yeah, preferably with an eye in it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could put the Eye of Horus in there, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
What do I
And then
see behind you? Is that your newest book?
that's no. This is my nonfiction.
Okay.
Believe
Okay.
believe it. You know an atheist.
Okay.
But yeah, my detective novels are what I really focus on. That's just something that I did to have out to fill out my library. But anyway,
Nice.
yeah, he likes to think that he is a writer, and we just let him
5%.
get away
That's-
with it.
yeah, they let me write the news. Yeah. But anyway, so getting back to Jim Baker. Yeah, at the bottom of the screen there, it showed those 7 year 7 year meals. So I'm wondering if because he's been selling those, he's been hawking those online. We actually did a news story about that not too long ago. They have like crappy potato soup.
Actually, you know what's kind of interesting is that if I'm not mistaken, when we went through it this time, it said 1 year food for two, but I think if we got when we got further into it, that's when it started to say 7 years. If I'm not mistaken, I'd almost like to rewind it and see, because
Yeah,
talk about pulling things from cavernous places, shall we say, right?
yeah. Let's try to make it fit what they're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it's a survivalist thing that he's doing. It's
Okay.
for people, but it's not for survivalists like zombie apocalypse or World War II. It's for the Revelations. It's for people
Oh, okay.
that want to survive
Second
Revelations.
coming or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
In case they're not lucky enough to
Rapture.
be, yeah.
Okay.
Unless
Yeah.
they're not lucky enough to be raptured.
Does he like endorse like caching weapons and
I
like,
haven't heard that.
just
I haven't
crazy
heard.
little
No,
bunkers and
Yeah.
sovereign
heard-
citizen type stuff?
Yeah, but he is selling food for you to take into the bunker with you, and and for a lot of money.
Wow.
It was really expensive for this crappy food. It was like really big. It was really like it was buckets of potato soup and cheese sandwiches and stuff like that. It was just like basic survival food, and he was charging huge amounts of money for it.
Huh. That's bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah. but
Well, he's a
what Jim-
rip-off artist.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what got him in trouble initially with the Heritage USA thing was that they were double booking. They had like 400 rooms, and they were selling up to 800 people, thinking some of them wouldn't show
Oh,
up.
wow. Huh.
And yeah, because that does happen a lot of times. Hotels do that too. Hotels will double book, but he was doing it in such a way that it got him in trouble because he was like really overbooking. Double booking to the point where he was. There's a law about how far you can how much you can double book, and he was violating it.
Well, I mean, he's been pretty good at scandal over many decades now. He's wing nut from way back with
Yeah.
what
With
was that
Ken.
show called? Because like I was saying earlier, my mom used to love to watch it just because she thought it was freaking hilarious with his wife Tammy Faye. And
Tammy Faye.
yeah, and then there was a scandal with I don't know, somebody
Jessica
that worked
Hahn.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I don't remember what the name of the show was though, but
I think
yeah, it was,
I know it was PTL, and I'm not sure if it's like
yeah,
they
it was
said
the
Praise the Lord or People That Love or something like that.
People That Love. Yeah, that's what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
They called it both. Yeah, PTL.
yeah.
People. It was PTL was also Praise the Lord. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, and Tammy Faye remarried when he was in prison. She divorced him and remarried. Like she had like it was all. Oh, I had no idea. You know,
You
she's like,
know, she did seem like an awfully sweet person, and she, there was something about her that was just kind of endearing, even, you know, and she died, and it was sad and everything like that. But poor thing, I think she might have very well been kind of a victim and naive, right?
yeah,
So yeah.
but I don't think anybody can be on anybody who's on an evangelism show and is involved in it knows at some level that it's a scam. Like
Probably, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, but we know that now because we've got a lot more mass communication. Whereas I think that would have been in the 80s, 90s.
it was in the 80s. Yeah.
80s.
Yeah. So she just seems like the kind of person that could have just been sucked along and thinking, "Oh, I'm married to a wonderful husband, and we've got this great life because God has blessed us." I have a soft spot for her for some reason.
Really? Well, I don't. Do you remember?
Actually, her last husband and he died in 2007. So if anybody is in our audience is interested in the rich widow, she is available as far as I know.
She's dead. She's
She died.
dead.
She didn't die?
She died
She's
of cancer.
dead.
No, she's dead. Yeah. That's part of the reason why I have a soft spot for her, because she was so open about dying. And not that I followed her or anything like that, but you'd see the occasional appearance, and she just seemed really sweet. She did seem pretty innocent. So yeah.
Do you remember the James Randi Popoff thing, where he caught Popoff using earpieces to get information?
Yeah, I don't remember it so much as I've seen it.
Well, that was his sweet innocent wife reading.
Oh
from the
yeah,
paper.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Actually, CFI was involved in catching. It's not known, or at least it's not very well known, but CFI was involved in catching Popoff. They're the ones who went to see Randy about it.
Oh, was it? They're the ones that brought it to him?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. It was. That's an interesting. Have you seen the James Randi documentary that was on HBO?
What was the name of it? Was it about a year or two ago?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been within the year, I thought, but maybe it's been a year or two.
I saw it on YouTube. I don't get
Yeah.
cable, so yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a good one.
That was very interesting.
Yeah, I wish I could.
I'm
remember the name
cheating
of it,
right
'cause it
now.
was well worth seeing. Yeah.
Yeah. Within the next 2 minutes, Nicole will know the title because
Yeah.
it'll just come to him.
Yeah. An honest liar.
Yes.
Yes, an
Yeah.
honest liar. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Just voices in Nicole's ear are telling him.
Yes, I'm a magician. I've got a great memory.
Yeah.
No, actually, though, to be serious, I've got multiple sclerosis and my memory is totally shot, so I have to use tricks like that. So that's why I was talking about cheating. I have to do it all the time.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, but you do a good job, and if you didn't tell us, we wouldn't know. So, good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Christine, you have the Facebook, you have the website, and your which we're going to link to. It'll be in the show notes, and it'll be in the description underneath the video when we put it on YouTube. So all of your links will be there. But you don't do Twitter?
No,
And-
I have a Twitter account, but I really never use it. I'm mostly on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've got the weird last name. So
Yeah,
anybody,
yeah.
you'll either find me or my dad, and I think you'll be able to tell who's who. So, my dad probably won't friend you if he doesn't know you. So
Yeah. Is your dad part of the community?
he is an atheist, but he's not involved in the community. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And my mom's agnostic, and she's, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have wonderful dinner conversations. It's so much fun. We argue. And, it's great. Yeah.
An atheist arguing is not the same thing as like the arguments we have at my house.
No, we're all on the same page. It's like going to skeptics in a pub where people start arguing. Everybody is on the same page, but you start arguing these details, and that's very stimulating, I find, right? So I'm really, really lucky to have wonderful parents and a wonderful daughter for whom we can, yell at each other over family dinner and have those kinds of conversations, but still always, be mostly in agreement on things, right? So it's fun. Yeah.
That's very nice.
Amazing family. Yeah.
Good for you. Okay, so Nicole, do you have any new videos coming out this week?
Well, I've just had a conference, a video from the non-conference. It's featuring Stephanie. I can't remember her last name. Oh,
Gormans? I can see.
Gortman. It's got like a T in it.
Gormanson, I think. Yeah, I know it starts with the G. I want to say Gormanson.
Okay.
And the thing is, so she's going to be our guest next week as well. So,
So we'll learn to pronounce your name between now and then, Stephanie.
I should know.
Exactly.
Yeah. She'll be worth tuning in for sure. She's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Good. And
she's very interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that I have another book, a book of noir stories coming out on November 2nd. And by the way, before we go, I did want to touch on something that happened this week. Of course, everybody's heard about the shooting in Oregon, and just because we're atheists here doesn't mean that we don't keep people in our thoughts, and we're not concerned about the families and the well-being. But this gentleman who did this shooting was what they call shoot, I can't think of the word now. What's the word when you don't? Oh, celibate. Okay, he was what they call an incel, which is involuntary celibate, which means that girls don't like him. That's what it means. So he was a member of this incel incel group on 4chan. Did you hear about this?
No.
No.
Okay, so he was on 4chan, and the conversation that he had on 4chan, he told the people on 4chan that he was going to go shoot up a school, and he started getting advice on how to do it from people in the chat room. They were telling him how, tell them you're going to take them as hostage, get them all rounded up in a corner, and then you can shoot them all down without any problems. They're like saying things like this to him. So this is they're an offshoot of the MRAs, the men's rights people that keep popping up their ugly heads. And but anyway, the reason I mentioned him, really, the main reason I mentioned him is because apparently when he went into this school to shoot, he was asking people what religion they are.
Yep.
And and it's not because he's an atheist or a Muslim or a Christian. He considered himself spiritual, but not religious. So he believed in God. He just didn't like organized religion. Well, the religious right has taken on this idea that he was asking people, like, for example, as soon as it came out, before anybody even knew the name of the shooter, as soon as it came out that he was asking people what religion they were, Pamela Geller posted that he was Muslim. So anyway, the whole reason I brought this up was to put out a call for whenever anything like this happens, to wait until the facts come in before we start saying what anything is and what anything means, and to recognize that as the religion in this story is so minor to the story, so insignificant to the story, that it's not even worth talking about. It doesn't matter what he believed. He didn't do this because of his religious beliefs. He did it because he was an incel.
Yeah, that's interesting because Mom and I were talking about it yesterday before more news had come out, and she had told me, he had asked people, "Are you Christian?" And I said, my first thought was, oh no, they're going to start blaming the Muslims or the atheists for this one, right?
Right.
You know, and it'll probably be spun that way anyway. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, there was a YouTuber yesterday, last night, who was saying that he was an atheist and was quoting a website that's not even a proper website. You know, it was just somebody's own personal website, and he there was a link to his my what is it called, MySpace or
MySpace?
Yeah.
MySpace. He
nobody
had a
uses that. Nobody
Yeah,
uses
I was
that
going to
anymore.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, but the killer had a MySpace page, and so this web page was referring to his to the MySpace page, but didn't bother looking reading anything there. And just because the guy said that he was not religious, they put that he was an atheist, and this guy on YouTube was just repeating. You know, he hadn't bothered to even check the MySpace page. He was just, hey, he's an atheist. So
Yeah.
we could.
Yeah. That'll happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to. That's what I wanted to discuss on that topic right there. I think we can bring the show to a conclusion now.
Just
Thank
one
you so much.
question.
Oh,
Just
What's
one
that?
question. How many mass shooters have been atheists?
Well, if you don't count Russia, which is a lot.
No, but
China.
the American mass shooters, you know, the American mass shooters that you've had, there's not been a
Yeah.
single one.
I don't know that for a fact, but that sounds about right. Wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer an atheist? He wasn't.
I'm not
He
sure.
was a mass killer, but he wasn't a mass shooter. He wasn't one of those. But yeah, most of the mass shooters have been religious people, but this guy's not really even religious though. So in this particular case, religion has absolutely nothing to do with it.
there was
Yeah.
a guy who, I don't know if it was a mass shooting or a murder, but he was an atheist that probably about a year or so ago. I remember the controversy around that.
Yeah.
But he was also mentally, you know,
mentally unstable.
yeah, which I think was the more plausible explanation for the
Yeah.
act, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
just playing the odds. Eventually, it's going to happen. You're going to have, you know. Oh, and
Yeah.
in
Being an atheist doesn't immune you to having a mental illness. It's the brain is an organ, and it can be it can go things can go wrong, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Now, in fiction, most serial killers are atheists because Hannibal Lecter is an atheist, and what's his name? The one that kills other serial killers. What's
Oh,
his name?
Dexter.
Dexter's an
Okay.
atheist.
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't know
he
that.
is.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I like the comment you made, Christine, about the brain being an organ, because it is, you know, a lot of people don't realize that it is an organ. It's like a liver or the pancreas or anything like that. And like any organ, it can be sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when the brain gets sick, there's no it's I mean that's totally, I mean that affects everybody when you have a sick brain. So
Yeah, and one hopes that they can recognize that in themselves and get help, or their families can help them with that and recognize changes in behavior and that sort of thing. If in fact you weren't, biologically inclined that way anyway, right? In which
right.
case,
Well,
hopefully,
according to his sister, in this particular case, according to his sister, he was a nice kid that gave them no clue that he was doing anything, that he had anything like this. Like he was weird, and and he couldn't keep a girlfriend. He never even had a date. Apparently, he's 26 years old and never been on a date. So he just wasn't anybody. He felt like women owed him sex. That's what the incels are. They feel like, why doesn't anybody want me? What's wrong? It's like it becomes a conspiracy thing with them. And they're a group unto themselves, or a little bit, that's a sort of privilege that, and there's misogyny involved in it. But apparently to his family, he might have been sociopath because, which that's my armchair diagnosis, because if his family couldn't tell, then it gives the impression that maybe he was keeping it all under wraps.
Well, wasn't there another similar situation where the guy basically was like, "Oh, women owe me," kind of thing, and he did a murder too? I can't remember if it was a mass murder or if it was, a single. Again, probably about a year ago. These seem to happen so often.
Yeah, they
it's
are.
a shame. But this guy was quite explicitly a misogynist, right? According to his
Well,
blog posts and stuff like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in Canada, we had
And-
a very famous one in Montreal at the Technological Institute. Do you remember back in the late
Yeah.
80s? There was a guy who went to the school and started shooting all the women.
Yeah.
It was really nasty.
Yeah. No, it's and it does seem quite often that serial killers, people will say about them, "Oh, they seem to be the nicest guy. He was like the guy next door," right?
Right.
So obviously, you can be quite clever and hide your sociopathedness and appear like that until stuff goes like that, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the stuff that he
unfortunate.
posted online that were the clues. There was apparently no clues in his life, but all the clues were online. But
Yeah.
And my computer just told me in my little ear that the Montreal killing was at École Polytechnique, and the guy who had did the mass murder his name was Marc Lépine.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that was a
Yeah.
very
Right,
sad thing.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
It was
Okay,
at
well-
the end of the 80s. It was in 89.
that's the 80s, but it's barely the 80s. But okay.
Yeah.
All right. Enough with the death and destruction talk. Let's go ahead. Again, thank you, Christine, for being here. We appreciated you very much. You did a very nice job with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
All right, so that's all for today. Please make sure that you subscribe to the Atheism TV channel. There you can watch the Infidel News for the Damned, where our talented team of writers and anchors present these and other stories not normally covered in the media. In the coming week, the Infidel will rerun today's stories and many more fascinating ones. You'll find Atheism TV at youtube.com/atheismtv. The Infidel Podcast of the Damned is a Nicole SD production. Nicole and I would like to recognize and say thank you to Truth Search, who did the voiceover used in our intro and gave us permission to use music from his song, Lied To, as our opening theme. We'd also like to thank Christine for participating in today's podcast. Nicole's channel is Nicole SD and can be found at youtube.com/NICOLSD. I'm Gamut Man on YouTube, at Gamut Man on Twitter, and my blog and information on my books, including my nonfiction title, Believe It, You Know, an Atheist, as well as my mystery novels featuring the atheist detective Lupa Schwartz, can be accessed at tinyurl.com/Lupa Landing. While there, you can sign up to receive my newsletter. Signing up also entitles you to choose one free ebook title from my collection of 99-cent novellas. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Yay!
Thank you.